Hello, my name is Avery Griffin, and today I will be talking about my favorite part of the brain. If you couldn't tell from the intro to the video, and I don't blame you if you couldn't, that was my rough draft, but my favorite part is the neuron. The neuron is a very important part of the brain. In a lot of ways, it is the foundation of the brain, and it has a lot of important functions. So let's jump on in. So what is a neuron? Well, a neuron is a type of cell used for transmitting messages throughout your brain and throughout your body. And there's three types of neurons, three main types: the sensory, the relay, and the motor neuron. They are just what they sound like. A sensory one is used to transmit information from sensory cells or receptor cells, so like when you touch something or when you see something. A relay neuron, also called an interneuron, will transmit messages between neurons, and they are the most abundant neuron in your body. Then there is the motor neuron, which connects to muscle cells, and so they control movement. Now, with any neuron, there's main parts to it that make them special. One of which is the dendrite, which you see here on the left, and that's what's going to connect to other neurons and bring in incoming messages. Then, of course, you have the cell body. And then you have this long strand here called the axon, and the message that comes in will be sent down the axon to the axon terminal, where it will be sent off to other neurons, for example. And then along the axon, you have the myelin sheath. This is used to insulate the axon, which speeds up that transmission. And then you have the nodes here. The nodes allow for that message to be amplified. And this is your basic structure to your neuron, how it works. So I kind of laid out the basics to how a neuron works, but to go in just a little bit more detail here, you have these pumps and these channels that are on the membrane of the neuron. And these are very important because the channels, for example, allow ions to come in and out of the neuron. And this is essentially what the message is. So when we talk about neurons firing, it's an electrical message is what's being sent, and the electricity essentially is, or it's coming from these ions. And these ions are, these red pluses are likely sodium ions that are coming into the cell and being sent down. And so that's what is making this happen here, is these channels. Okay, so behavior and disease. So when it comes to behavior, neurons are really involved with just about everything. When it comes to movement, of course, we talked about the motor neurons, even thinking, or when you're reacting to something, or even your emotions. At some level, your neurons are involved in making those happen. Unfortunately, your neurons are also very likely involved when it comes to neural diseases, and diseases that specifically cause the death or dysfunction of neurons. Those are called neurodegenerative here. And so I have two main examples: Alzheimer's disease, which is something that results in dementia, which is just the loss in normal cognitive abilities. So take memory, for example, or language, or emotional control. And there's two hallmarks to Alzheimer's disease. The first one, if I can pronounce this correctly, it's neurofibrillary tangles. And what these are is basically a molecule of protein, of tau protein, will detach. And when these detach, it's really bad for the neurons because these are used for structural support. And so without them, the neurons will fold in and collapse on themselves. And then the other hallmark is the amyloid plaques. And so these are abnormal patches that will form on the axons of affected neurons. This is also very bad. And the second example I have here is the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And so this is also known as motor neuron disease. And essentially what happens here is you have the death of neurons controlling muscles. So we talked about the motor neurons. Essentially these neurons are dying. And that's really bad because what can happen is that will lead to extreme muscle weakness or muscle stiffness, and people with this disease will have difficult time speaking, drinking, or even breathing. So it's really, really bad. Well, that's all I have. I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you.